All right, let's dive into a fascinating theological puzzle that sits right at the intersection of faith and science. We're talking about the fossil record, and it all boils down to one huge question. When did death actually begin? This gets to the very heart of some core beliefs, so let's unpack it.
So here is the problem in a nutshell. On one side, you have the biblical account, which is traditionally read to mean there was absolutely no death before Adam and Eve's sin, the fall. But on the other side, you've got the fossil record, which shows us pretty clearly millions and millions of years of animals living, fighting, and dying long before humans ever walked the earth. So how can both of these things possibly be true?
Here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll lay out the problem in a bit more detail. Then we'll look at two really interesting solutions proposed in the source material. One involves, believe it or not, reworking time itself. The other is all about redefining what death even means. From there, we'll see how that second idea could totally reshape the conversation.
Okay, Section 1. Let's get really specific about this problem. For many Christians, the idea that death is a direct result of human sin is a foundational belief. But as you can see, that immediately slams right into a wall of paleontological evidence.
You see, the traditional logic is pretty straightforward. If death only started with the fall, then every single fossil we've ever dug up has to be from after that moment. This really boxes creationist theories into a corner. It forces them to argue that pretty much all of geology and the entire fossil record were created in a flash, either when Adam sinned or during the Great Flood.
So how do you get out of that corner? Well, the source material offers up a couple of ways. The first one is pretty mind-bending. It suggests a divine intervention that didn't just change the future, but actually went back and changed the past.
Okay, so this theory goes like this. After the fall, God essentially went back and rebooted creation. He rewrote history to include things like death, predators, and disease. So the fossil record we see today wasn't part of the original perfect creation. It was sort of patched in after the fact. For an all-powerful being, no big deal, right? But it means the world's science studies now just wouldn't match the original Genesis account, because reality itself got an update.
Now for the second solution, which you'll see takes a totally different path. Instead of rewriting all of history, it asks a really powerful question. What if we've been getting a key word wrong this whole time?
And this question is the key that unlocks this entire idea. What if the warning God gave in the Garden of Eden, "You will surely die," wasn't about their physical body shutting down? What if it was about something far, far worse? To really get our heads around this, we need to unpack this amazing analogy that's at the heart of the idea. It's all about the relationship between the human body, the spirit, and the soul.
The central concept here is that our universe is kind of like an artificial construct, and our bodies are like vessels or avatars designed to hold a spirit, which is the piece of us that comes from God's real world, outside this simulation, so to speak.
So let's break that down. First, you have the body. You can think of it as the hardware. It's an incredibly advanced biological machine. It works, it's functional, but from a spiritual point of view, it's not truly alive by itself. Then you have the spirit. This is the operator, the driver, the user who's actually logged into the avatar. The spirit is the part that comes from God, and it's the entity that is truly alive. And this is where it gets really interesting. When you put the body and the spirit together, they combine and they interact, and they create a totally new third thing, the soul. And it's this unique combination of body, spirit, and soul that, in this view, makes a person literally made in God's image.
To make this less abstract, let's use an analogy. Imagine a theme park with these incredible miniature cities. If you saw little remote-controlled figures walking around, you'd think they were functional, but you wouldn't say they're alive. But if you could somehow put a tiny person inside each figure to control it, you'd recognize that the figure is still just a machine, but the operator inside is very much alive.
And this is how it all ties back to the fossil record. If we apply this idea to animals and plants, this theory suggests they don't have that God-infused spirit. They're like those functional, remote-controlled figures. So when they die, it isn't death in the true spiritual sense. It's just a ceasing of function, a machine shutting down. From God's perspective, nothing that was truly alive has been lost.
So, if the death of animals isn't the issue, what was God's warning all about? The real danger in this paradigm was spiritual death. It's a deep, eternal, negative change to the human spirit itself. That was the catastrophe God was warning Adam and Eve about, not the simple shutting down of their physical avatar.
So you can see how this redefinition of death builds a completely new framework. It totally reframes that original conflict and opens the door for a new kind of creationist paradigm.
So let's put it side by side. On the one hand, you have animal and plant death, which is just a ceasing of function. It's always been part of the system. But human physical death, on the other hand, was something new, introduced by God after the fall, almost like a physical symptom to show that a much more devastating spiritual event had happened. And there you have it. That's the logical endpoint. If animal death, this ceasing of function, was part of creation from day one, then the fossil record, with all its evidence of ancient animal life and death, no longer contradicts the biblical story of the fall. The conflict? It just evaporates. And think about the possibilities this opens up. It means you don't need to try and cram billions of years of geology into a few thousand years. It gives these theories so much more flexibility and offers a potential path to harmonize what we see in the ground with what's written in the biblical narrative. Which leaves us with one final, really provocative question to think about. It makes you wonder, are some of these old, tired arguments between science and faith failing not because one side is right and the other is wrong, but maybe because the whole debate is built on a flawed foundation? What if we need to go back and question our most basic assumptions?